When the walls come tumbling down, I'm speaking now about the financial collapse, who should we turn to? For that matter, who should the rest of the world be turning to for advice? According to Secretary of the Treasury Timothy Geithner, China is a pretty darn good place to start. Joining me now to talk about this is investigative journalist Webster Tarpley. Timothy Geithner said this, was sort of telling this to Europe during a trip, which he's on right now, in Europe, specifically in Germany. According to, the White House and the Secretary of the Treasury, he is there to, get on the same page with other leaders from Europe. Right. You're saying that there's some other reasons that he's there as well. Yeah,
this thing about China is double talk. It's a deception. Maybe we can get to that in a minute. But the fundamental mission of Geithner on this trip to Europe is to make the world safe for derivatives, for speculation, and for this casino economy of globalization. He's been in London. He's been in Berlin and Frankfurt, meeting with, especially the main one is the German finance minister, Schäuble, and they've basically had a clash, and the substance of the clash is this: the Germans have instituted a ban on certain kinds of derivatives, the naked credit default swaps, the worst kind of derivatives in many ways, and they've also proclaimed that you can have no naked short selling of German stocks, European Eurozone bonds, and also the euro itself. So that's pretty strong beginning to regulate derivatives. Now, Schäuble made clear in these meetings that Germany is determined to proceed unilaterally. They are determined to regulate over-the-counter derivative sales, something that is anathema for Geithner. And they're doing this because, as they say, markets are out of control. And in one of his interviews, Schäuble pointed to the total disconnect between the tremendous mass of financial transactions, on the one hand, and goods and services in the real world on the other. And these are now completely out of touch. So I think there was certainly a clash behind the scenes. Geithner claims that there was a broad agreement on regulatory reform. I think that's baloney. The questions are, what does the U.S. think about this ban on naked credit default swaps? Geithner is too deceptive to address the subject in the press conference. And also the question of a Tobin tax, that is a financial transaction tax, which the German government is also supporting. So here are two big things where Geithner he's at loggerheads with Schäuble, but they decided to cover it up.
What do you think about this, though, the Secretary of the Treasury for the United States of America going to Europe and telling Europe, why don't you take some notes from China?
Yeah, look, Geithner probably thinks that consumption means derivatives, because that's what he seems to think is the basis of an economy. If we look at the Chinese stimulus plan, right, the $586 billion stimulus that the Chinese came up with about a year ago, this has got nothing to do with the things that Geithner talks about or what Pelosi and Obama have put through. The Chinese plan is based on public works and public infrastructure, that is, railroads, fast rail. The Chinese are building 30,000 miles of fast rail, and they're the world leaders. They're building 21 nuclear reactors. They're doing irrigation, airports, housing, rural electrification. Geithner, I guess he, again, thinks that financial services are the main thing that people can consume, that you can eat derivatives or wear them or live in them or something like this. So I think this is just a smokescreen, again, to hide the main area of clash.
I want to talk for a second about a new book out. It argues that the free market system that we're used to in the West is on its way out. The book appropriately titled The End of the Free Market. And it argues that countries like China and Russia are using a new economic model. That model, state capitalism. And the author seems to argue that that's effective.
Well, look, the U.S. economy, to the extent that we still have one, is based on the New Deal model, which is a highly regulated kind of industrial capitalism. And this is what we had starting in 1933. Now, for the past 40 years, since the coming of Nixon, more or less, reactionary Republican administrations have been steadily dismantling that entire edifice. So now we've got no more regulation, and we've got no more industry. So what we've got left is this casino, gambling, speculative derivatives paradise that Geithner thinks is so great. And, of course, that's not viable. So I wouldn't call it state capitalism. I would actually call it the New Deal model. And to the extent that you have that in China and to some degree in Russia, that is viable. That will work. And there are other versions that will work. What will not work is this free market fetishism which is the thing that's caused the present depression, is the fruits of deregulation, privatization, union busting, and the free market, as they say.
I'm curious, Mr. Tarpley, what you think will come out of this. This meeting, obviously an important one that the Secretary of the Treasury needs to do. What will change? And especially in light of the fact that we've got the G20 coming up next month.
Right. Well, Geithner is obviously trying to organize Osborne at the British Exchequer, Trichet at the European Central Bank, and others against the German policy. But Schäuble has now emerged as the strongman in the Merkel cabinet based on the idea that he knows something that Geithner doesn't know. He knows that derivatives are not wealth, and you can't build your house on derivatives. Now, in terms of the meeting in Korea, right, we're going to have the G20 meeting in Seoul. I'm very glad to say that when the delegates get there, if they pick up the main English language magazine in South Korea, they're going to find an interview with me saying ban derivatives and impose a Tobin tax on world speculation. So I hope they take that to heart, because if they don't, the depression will get worse.
I guess I just want to know, I mean, it's pretty interesting when we see what's happening in Greece. It's been pretty rough there, let's just say. Today, right now, we're just a few blocks away from the United States Capitol. They are talking in the Senate about a war spending bill. And there's a Republican senator from Oklahoma, Senator Coburn, who is arguing that we're spending too much, even though it's on war spending. That we should only spend what we have. Talk a little bit about this as it relates to the financial situation on the whole.
Well, for those who don't know, Coburn is a reactionary Republican from Oklahoma. He's part of this strange religious cult called the Family. I don't know what goes on there. They've got some mysterious house here in downtown D.C. But the main thing is, if he thinks the U.S. is turning into Greece because of Afghanistan war spending, then get out of Afghanistan. Have the guts to address the problem at the root. And, of course, since he's also a warmonger, he can't play with that idea. The thing that he has to remember is what we learned in the 1930s under Herbert Hoover. If you cut the budget this year, the deficit will be bigger next year in a depression. So if you attempt to make these savings and balance the budget, unemployment goes up, government revenue goes down, production goes down, you make the depression worse. And if you insist on this austerity psychosis, right, we've got austerity ghouls running around all over Washington. If you really stress that stuff, you get yourself into a death spiral, yes indeed, and then there's no way out. Once you're in a depression, you've got to have a recovery program, and that's the lesson of the New Deal that a Republican like this can never learn.
Investigative journalist Webster Tarpley with that analysis.